Okay, so as I mentioned, this is going to be a sort of unorthodox beginning to this year. I have no idea. This is related to Tefilah, but it's just been on my mind and I wanted to talk about it. As I mentioned, and pardon anyone who already this is duplicated on in terms of Facebook. So I just found out that a family member died of COVID on Sunday. And it's not sad, or I mean, it is sad, but I'm not sad because I didn't know this person. So this is someone we called Sister Susan. We, growing up, I always heard about Sister Susan, but this is so we call my grandmother Popo. Okay, so this is Popo's sister. Okay, my grandmother's sister, my great aunt. And so I always grew up hearing her call it Sister Susan, and I always thought that that was just like my grandma's nickname for her. But then I found out when I was a teenager, she's a sister. She's actually a nun. Okay, she's a Catholic nun. She, I think she joined a convent and became a nun when she was 21, and she served there for 44 years before retiring. And she just passed away on Sunday at the age of 93 from COVID. And because she was in a convent for her whole life, then we didn't really know her. And it was, and even my mom, even by the time my mom was born and growing up, then she didn't know her. And so like, it's not, that's why like, I'm not sad in a personal sense because I never really met her and I don't really know her. Um, but, but it did get me thinking. First of all, it did put me in a very Kohelisy type mood in the sense of Dor Holef Vador Bav Haaretz Lo Amadas, because that generation, so I was born in Hawaii, and my mom was born in Hawaii, and her parents were born in Hawaii, and her mom was born in Hawaii. Her parents were born in Hawaii, and then her mom's dad was also born in Hawaii, and so this is the Cam side of the family, and they've been there for a very long time, and now the only one left is my grandmother, who's 96. And so, but the thing that made it, and that was one thing that was Kohelisy, but the other thing that was Kohelisy was the fact that like there's there's a thing in Koheles that talks about a person who like spends all their life gaining gathering wealth, and like doesn't have any other family, and then when they die, then all their wealth goes away. So obviously Sister Susan, because she was a nun, she never got married, she never had kids, and but she didn't spend her life gathering wealth. And so but there's this like weird thing, like there's this weird Kohelisy type vibe of the fact that like this person who I'm related to, who lived a 93-year-old life, who spent her life like serving others, is just gone. And so where I found right like a half an hour ago, literally half an hour ago, my mom sent me this newspaper clipping with not an obituary. This was actually when she retired, and so she had a quote about Tefilah here, and it got me thinking about Tefilah. Okay, so that's her. So that's Sister Susan. And I guess this is in 1992. So she must have been, if she was born in, I can't do the math. She was born in 27, so I don't know how old she is, but whatever. So we also found out that her order of nuns basically was noteworthy for saving Jews from the Holocaust, which for a convent of nuns from Maui is not a thing you would typically hear. So that was just an interesting, connection there. But then at the end, when she's asked about her retirement, so this is what she says, and this is what I want to talk about for Tefilah. Let me see if I can put it up here. So she says, I am now looking forward to moving on to the next phase in my life, to have the leisure time to look, listen, and appreciate the beauties of nature, to know that God and all his majesty is all around me. My life has been so busy, I have not had enough time to smell the flowers and to pray in a leisurely way. Okay. And I guess that's what she did after she retired in 1992. So 1992 to 92 to this year. I mean, that's a long retirement, and so the thing that made me think, there's two things that made me think about this. So first of all, this led me to think about the idea of saying that because of her busy life, and her busy life, if you read the article, she basically spent her whole life in serving and caring for other people. Like it says here, after the fall of Saigon, she was asked by the Catholic Welfare Bureau to direct the Indo-Chinese resettlement program in Los Angeles County. So like she really, and again, she was a nun, so like she didn't have material possessions and stuff, and she spent her life in service of God according to her understanding, which obviously is very different than ours. But I guess what piques my interest here is this thing of, because she's had a life that's so busy, she hasn't had time to pray in a leisurely way. And I don't have a like, formulated thought about this, but just to share like what's on my mind about this, because today I read the Mishnah in my Pirkei Avos class, Lo hamidrash hua ikar el hamase. Now we haven't learned that yet, but again, just on its face level, Lo hamidrash hua ikar. So midrash is not ikar, and I don't think it means midrash like midrash haggadah. It means, literally, what would you say the literal translation of midrash is? Literal translation.
To be extrapolating.
Yeah, like extrapolation, right? So it's not even the word for learning, but like it has an implication of like textually expounding on text. Expounding on text, like unpacking text. So lo hamidrash hua ikar el hamaaseh. So again, I haven't learned any of the mafarshim on that yet. I just brought it up factually in my class this morning. But I was thinking about this and about the relationship between tefillah and action. And this is a point that I made in my Erev Yom HaKippurim Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim shiur, which if you haven't listened to it, that's one that I feel like is the most important shiur that I will have given in my life so far. I don't know. But like that's like a big thing in terms of how we relate to God. And one of the major points of the shiur, which the Rambam ends the more Nevuchim with, is that the whole purpose of the Midos HaRachamim is not just to intellectually contemplate them, but to emulate them, and to enact, Rachum, Chanun, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed Ve'emes in action. That our knowledge of God shouldn't end with just intellectual knowledge, but should overflow into our actions and like lead to us being a vehicle of Ratzon Hashem in the world, And I was thinking about that in relation to tefillah and the statement here of like that her life has been so busy and she hasn't had enough time to pray in a leisurely way. And it's very interesting because literally her whole idea of tefillah was absurd, I'm sure. I don't know Catholic doctrine, but she's praying to a man God, and I read like I mentioned that her order was, one of the big claims to fame was that they saved a bunch of Jews from the Holocaust, and one of the nuns was actually martyred by the Nazis. And so she wrote a manifesto. I just only had time to skim it because I just got it right before I give shiur now. And it was her manifesto, and she was talking about how like she pledges her life to Jesus and like to the vicar who is in Rome and like all this other stuff. And so clearly her idea of tefillah is completely removed from reality, Yet the crazy thing is that like this nun who martyred herself, and then Sister Susan, my great aunt, spent her whole life like literally enacting, rachamim and chen and chesed, and like caring for people who are downtrodden and like in need, and like orphans and stuff, So it's just this weird paradox that made me think about the fact of like how much of our tefillah, obviously, the ikra, the essence of tefillah, we talked about this on Friday Q&A, that like tefillah essentially is an activity of judging yourself and evaluating, what your standing is in line with God's value system, but like, and so it is it's an avodah shebelev, it's an activity of the mind, and of the heart. But like, if that doesn't actually change you and make you into someone who is enacting Ratzon Hashem in the world, so then you got to question like what value it is, And so I don't know. I was just, because I was about to be giving a shiur on tefillah, and I just got this article beforehand, it really just led me to wonder. And again, this very paradoxical article where I have this relative who, by the way, like, not that I ever use the word clergy about myself, because I view myself as a teacher, not a clergy person. But if you, and technically nuns are not clergy either, but it is weird. Like, it's just a weird affinity that literally the only two people in the last like 200 years in any branch of my family who like went into a profession associated with God is this nun who's my great aunt, and me who's like a teacher in Torah. You know, very very different in their nature, but like it just this whole weird juxtaposition just got me thinking like what what is our like are we putting enough focus on translating tefillah into changing the way we act, and like I mentioned, I think I mentioned to you guys, I forgot. Wait. Yeah, we read it in the Mishnah last week, that, the Chassidim Harishonim would spend an hour before davening preparing themselves, and then an hour in davening, and then an hour after davening. And I feel like the hour after davening is the hardest one to understand, because before davening, you can understand that you're preparing for tefillah, and we understand the category of preparing for tefillah. And then um, like in tefillah, you can understand because that's like that's the essential activity of davening. But like the question is like, what's the activity? What is the hour awaiting after tefillah? And I don't have an understanding of that yet because I'm still working through it with Levi. But like, it's got to have something to do with taking the ideas and the insights that you got in tefillah and then translating it into how you're going to go into your life afterwards. And I feel like that's just a step that I can't speak for you guys, but like I definitely, I spent a lot of time thinking about tefillah in preparation for tefillah. That's what we're doing right now. That's what this weekly shiur is. And I try to spend time and energy in the actual activity of davening, but I really just don't think that much about how I translate, the insights of davening into tefillah, and certainly not bein anu l'chavero, And like, this is a big idea in tefillah, is like the whole thing, Joe was mentioning last week that we put all the tefillos in plural, even though the lashon of the pasuk is in singular, like Rafa'ini Hashem ve'erafeh, and we changed it to plural, and like the Mefarshim are bothered enough by that to ask the question, like, how can you just change the lashon of the pasuk? And it says for tefillah purposes, it's fine, So however you understand that halakhically, like, it's a big thing that we are supposed to be, thinking about all of our needs and how we line up to God's value system, but thinking about it in terms of other people as well, and how we live in order to help our fellow Jew and our fellow human being to achieve those needs, And like in this morning's Marcus Aurelius, those who listen to it, like where he's talking about how all of us have in common reason. And if we have reason in common, then we also have in common the dictates of reason, what reason is obligating us to do. And if we have the dictates of reason in common, then we also have law in common, because law should be based on what rationality is. And if we all have law in common, then we're all common citizens. And if we all have common citizens, then we're all members of one political association. And from that, this morning I went into talking about like, that every human being, ultimately, we envision every human being living in one society, which is also, around Yedias Hashem, and everyone has their needs provided for. And like, that's the ideal we're striving for, So I don't know. All these ideas have been like swirling around in my mind today, especially in the last half an hour when I got this article. And because in the article, Sister Susan mentions prayer, and like, again, it's just like a weird, because she's going to stop her busy life. Now she has time to pray, and this is leading to this realization that like, no, maybe it should be the other way around, that if your activity of tefillah is not dictating what you do in your busy life, then there's something wrong with your tefillah, or there's something wrong with your life, or there's something wrong with both of them. So those are my thoughts, however scattered they are. Any questions or feedback? I just had to get that out, You got to capture the insights while they're coming to you,
I'm definitely gonna think about that.
Okay. Yeah. But like, it's insane. Like, it's insane that we talk about, Hashiva Shoftenu, and then like, how much are we involved in actually like bringing about justice, like, or, I mean, it's admittedly, it's harder to relate to because we're talking about like other people instead of ourselves. And like, yeah, the first half of the bakashos do pertain to ourselves, but like, all of them really are related to other people as well. Like, we don't explicitly reference, the Yasom and the Almana in our Shemona Esrei, but like the theme is present throughout all of like, certainly Pesukei de Zimra, and like anytime we talk about God. And it's just like I can't help but think it's like a form of hypocrisy to be asking God for for things and to implement like his value system when like if we're not actually like making motions towards that on its own. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, isn't it like the Navi talks about that, right? About like God doesn't want like stolen
Right.
sacrifices and like all that stuff.
Yeah, right. It's like there's this
It's
idea
like
of a
similar
voda
idea.
of like just you know doing what God asks, and if it goes against justice or if it doesn't serve justice, then that's not the type of a voda that God wants. Yeah. So same thing for tefillah.
A couple comments, not
Sure.
on the last point, though I do think
Yeah.
it's somewhat hypocritical, but also we also do have, like we need to have a strict format of tefillah, and like it's all hypocritical in a certain sense, like we want health, but like how much are we going out to, go and heal people, you know?
Right.
But the point I primarily wanted to get to was about praying in a leisurely way. I mean, first of all, it's beautiful language,
Yeah.
the way that she says it, and you can tell it's like it's very real to her. That's
Yeah.
not just that's not something you say casually, to
Right.
get like popularity points or something.
Right.
Um, and I think with ourselves, I think there are two you know um, relevant elements to it, I guess. That first of all, in terms of any form of tefillah outside the formal structure of 3 times a day, just speaking to God type of tefillah, which is definitely more leisure in a certain sense. It's really just whatever's on your mind, your own intimate, personalized relationship with Hashem out of a formalized text, which I think most people probably don't do enough of. Um,
Yeah.
and in
That's
terms
actually
of
just before you go into your next thought. That's actually something that I was asking for requests from Lomdeha for what to do in our Friday seminars, and one of the topics that was requested was like the what are the parameters of extemporaneous tefillah? Like what you're mentioning, because like the Rambam does talk about that at the end of Hilchos Brachos, or at the end of Hilchos Brachos chapter 10, I think. And like I've always wanted to look into the sugya because on the one hand, like just like you said, like actual tefillah is so rigidly structured, but yet the Rambam at the end of Hilchos Brachos, let me just actually show it to you so you don't have to take my word for it. Hold on just 1 second here. Hold on just 1 second. I'm sharing a bunch of stuff here. Remember your next thought. uh, okay, hold on. Mishnah Torah. Yeah, I really need to get into the habit of when I go to the Mishnah Torah, I still think I should use Michon Mamre just for the speed on Zoom. I hate to say it. Oh, see, that's the Mishnah Gedolos. All right, let's go to Michon Mamre. Boom, lightning. Boom, lightning. Not really. Ahava, brachos, yud at the end. So just to show, because like again, because of my exposure to tefillah, I like have an instinct to like balk at the notion of extemporaneous tefillah, like formulating your own way. But the Rambam does seem to say, let's look at the end here. He says, after this is the parak with all the miscellaneous brachos and tefillos. So he says at the end, klal shel davar, lolam yitzak adam al ha'asid lavo vivakesh rachmi. A person should always cry out about the future and ask for mercy. V'yitin hodaya al sha'avar. And give thanks according to about what happened in the past. V'yodev yishabech kfi kocho, and give thanks and praise kfi kocho, according to his capacity. V'chol hamarbe lahodos es Hashem u'lashabcho tamid harzeh meshubach. And the more a person increases thanking God and praising him constantly, then the more praiseworthy he is. So if a person wants to argue with this and say, no, he's talking about like the halachically legislated brachos, I don't think that stands up for two reasons. Number one, kfi kocho is the type of lashon that he used when he's talking about the original form of tefillah in Hilchos Tefillah, when he says that each person would be, before there was a set text. Let's see here, that he says. I mean, it's not the exact same lashon, but Oh, it is the exact same Lashon. Sorry. So a person, what was the mitzvah d'oraisa? Says a person would daven and supplicate each day and recount the praises of God. And then afterwards ask for the needs that he needs through request and supplication. Then he would give praise and thanks to God for what he bestowed upon him. Each one according to his capacity. And that was, the Rambam explicitly says, was not according to any text. It was just like according to whatever language you wanted to do it in. And secondly, if the Rambam is talking about a set amount of just the set brachos, so then like it's a much more difficult read to say v'chol hamarbe lahodos es Hashem u'lashabcho tamid. So like, what does that mean? You have to like be like machayev yourself in extra brachos that are halachically chayev. Like, to me, it's mashma that the Rambam means that you should thank and praise God constantly according to your own language outside of the parameters of the legislative brachos and tefillos. The only question is like, how do you do that given the fact that halachically and metaphysically the parameters are so strict with regards to tefillah and brachos, you know? So that's something, Joe, that I want to take up. And maybe we can take it up in this shiur. Maybe I'll do it for Lamdeha, but like, I've been meaning to look into that for a while because I agree. It seems like a very good venue for actually like, you know, developing your relationship with God, whatever that means, as we discussed last time or 2 times ago. But yeah. All right. What's the other thing you're going to say?
Yeah. So the second point was also that even within our structured tefillah, you know, I think it, for most people probably, I mean, maybe I'm just projecting, but I think it's accurate that most people daven by rote, basically. Like you can probably, the average person can just close your eyes for like a nice 25 seconds during davening and like not even realize, or someone can just pull your sitter out of the way. You wouldn't even notice, you know? And like, obviously that's a killer for tefillah. You know, that's not a voda shebelev at all.
Right.
And when you think about the Mishnah Novos talking about the Chassidim Rishonim, even just like to put up those kind of numbers, like I think someone did the math. Like if you daven Shmona Esrei for an hour, right? So it's 100 divided by 19 brachos is 3.15. Okay. So that's just over 3 minutes of bracha. And someone did the full math. It came out to like I think 6 seconds a word. And I tried it once. There was like a stretch in yeshiva.
That's an interesting experiment. That's a very tempting experiment.
Yeah. So like I was like, okay, obviously I'm not gonna go the whole Shemona Esrei like that, you know, I'll waste half the day. But you know, at least like the first bracha or the first line of the first bracha, and like putting like full mental concentration into all those words. And when you daven like that, it kind of just, I'm not gonna say I sustained it. I didn't. You know, it's really hard. But like when you put that type of focus in it, I think it naturally changes you. You know, and then also when you put in the additional work after the fact, trying to actively implement it, it's only gonna compound itself. But just, you know, the focus and the attention, I think that itself does a lot of the work naturally.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that is a tempting experiment. I got to say, the only time I've ever tried anything close to that is those times when I'm davening by myself, Hanates, and I accidentally finish the Shema too fast, and I have to stretch out the. I mean, I don't have to stretch out, like you can wait, but like I tend to stretch out the bracha of Ga'al Yisrael, like the last, like, you know, like couple sentences, you know. And you're right, it does, like, it forces you to pay attention in a different way, just kind of like the way that people talk about it, like if you savor food that you're eating, you know, it just, you know, you've got nothing else to do if you've already made your goal to create that space of time, you know, to like do it in. So you're just kind of like having to focus on it. Yeah, it's interesting. All right, good observation.
Building on that exact same thing, and also like kind of what I think Sister Susan was getting at. Yeah. When I was in Turo, I actually had the best davenings. Wednesday nights after class, we would daven in school. And I'll tell you why. First of all, it was done in a computer room, like a computer lab. Yeah. And like I had like this tiny little pocket sitter I wasn't even like using. Yeah. But I think the reason that I had like a better kavanah then than any other time, besides maybe yeshiva when like I like act like in Israel when I was actively like trying to make my tefillah better. Yeah. I think it was because all work was like assigned for Wednesday. There was 2 days a week. It was Mondays and Wednesdays, and Wednesdays were like the toughest days. Like all assignments were due, and then like you're finally like done. Like it's like, okay, weekend already, and then like the brain like was able to just like focus on Tefilah.
That's interesting because like I think I can relate to that experience. It's funny. I have my own weird Turo related Tefilah experience, which I'll comment on in a second. But my experience with this, and I made this point in the 5-minute Kavana videos, that I'm a big believer in conservation of Kavana. You know, now obviously halakhically you have to conserve your Kavana for the first pasuk of the Shema and the first bracha of Shemona Esrei. You know, so I try to do that. But there's only one bracha that I actively summon up all my Kavana for, that's outside of Tefilah, like outside of Tefilah and Shema, you know, and that is Kiddush a Friday night. And I try, and I feel like what you just described of like the entire week has been building towards this, and like you're at a state of literally like halakhic leisure, you know, in the sense of like you can't do anything else, you finish all your work, and it definitely creates the mental space to be able to have that that attention. So yeah, so the question I guess is, do you need to retire as a nun or go to Turo to have that kind of feeling? I would like to think no. You know, like the question is, how can you can you summon that up? And what I'm thinking now is like, see, I feel like another problem with our davening, I'm just spitballing here, okay? This is just throwing this out here. Another problem with our davening, I think most of us, whether we are davening b'yechidus or in a minyan, our usage of the time is in the hands of someone else. You know, if we're in a minyan, then we have to go at the pace of the minyan. And even if we don't go at the pace of the minyan, you have the pressure to go at the pace of the minyan, you know, if you're davening slower or whatever, you know. And then when you're at home, like when I'm at home, I can set my own pace, but the pressure of other activities encroaches on that, you know? So what I'm wondering now, and this is just again, just spitballing here, I wonder what would happen if we were kovea itim latfila. Yeah.
Yeah. So finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, like, it's the same principle that you're saying, Joe, about the Hasidim Harishonim not being kovea an hour, because that's insane. Who can do that? You know, you'd end up like wasting time, I think. But if you just said like, I'm going to do nothing else. Let's say like you daven, you know, b'yechidus chakris or whatever. You know, what if you just say, I'm going to do nothing else for this half hour except things related to chakris. You know, so either you stretch out your davening for an entire half hour, or you daven and you finish, and then you sit there afterwards, you know, thinking about your tefillah or whatever, and you set it aside. And then if you did that in a disciplined way, I feel like it would create the space where you would have that relief of, I need to rush to the next thing, you know, and maybe that would improve the quality of the tefillah. Yeah, Joe, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. I had a Rebbe who said in his neighborhood they had an 100-minute Shacharis minyan.
Wow.
Only on Fridays.
Yeah.
And they first recruited him. He's like, you know, that sounds kind of crazy, but he went, and he would go consistently. Eventually, like the minyan just fizzled out because it was just, you know, like almost too hard at a point. There was like barely a minyan.
Yeah.
But he said like those davenings were just fantastic. Like there's nowhere, like, you know, you're there for an hour. You're not looking at the clock. Like there's nowhere for your mind to go. Like you're just like, you force yourself to be just present.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely true that, you know, we're distracted and our minds are in 1,000 other places. And if we would just be, you know, I'm sure if we were, let's say, you know, sentenced to prison for life, you know, life in prison, no bail, no way out.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like we would have better kavanah, at least for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, when you just know, okay, there's nothing else for me to do right now. This is it.
Right. Right.
They had that in yeshiva, Kavanah minyan.
Was that a thing?
And like they had it every month around Rosh Chodesh. They had it in the basements of YBT.
I didn't
up
know
until
about
coronavirus.
Yeah,
And
not YBT people. There was like people from
usually
like,
not YBT people.
But, yeah.
But I don't know if they weren't granted access to go to YFR or Shar Yashuv, but a lot of those guys came and davened in the basement of yeshiva, and like they spent maybe like 40 minutes. It was always Marv. They spent about like 40 minutes on Marv, maybe, give or take.
Interesting. Yeah. See, I think just to comment on the, first of all, I like when Joe was saying about that example about that it was only on Fridays. I might have told this story before, but I'll tell it again. That Rabbi Moskowitz said that that Rav, I don't know when or where this was, but Rabbi Moskowitz, my Mishlei Rebbe, davened, I guess, in the minyan with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky for a certain period of time, and he said that Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, after Shacharis every day, would have he had a mini Tanakh that he kept in his talis bag, and he would do a Nach Yomi. He would do a parak of Nach a day. And then Rabbi Moskowitz said, but I noticed he didn't have it in his Shabbos talis bag. He had separate Shabbos talis. He didn't have his Shabbos talis bag. What do you learn from there? That he wasn't neurotic about it. And so that was talking about one dimension of that. But I think that it's also I feel like it's very easy for a person to make these types of practices into a neurotic thing or into an extremist thing or into an ascetic thing where you're trying to make this into your thing, and the way I prefer to look at it is I've quoted this a lot. This is, I think, in the top 10 Bruce Lee quotes here, but in my top 10 Bruce Lee quotes, people have to grow by skillful frustrations. Otherwise, they have no incentive to develop their own means and ways of coping with the world. So this is something that my whole, approach, this is in the I Hate Sukkah article that I wrote, or the Lefum Tzara Agro according to Bruce Lee article that I wrote. But halacha is skillful frustrations. It is ways to take your routines and upset them in order to get you to reflect on yourself and to stimulate change, And I feel like experimenting, not committing to, not making a netter, not going all in, not obsessing about, but experimenting with a thing like that of 100-minute shacharis, or I'm going to try saying my kiddush on Friday night with kavana, these are healthy experiments that at least give you knowledge of where you're at. Let's say it doesn't actually improve your tefillah at all. You at least get knowledge of where you're at. And then you have the data to be able to figure out how to improve on that afterwards,
I think related to a point about the, making it into a neurotic thing or something, or an obsession.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a true story, but I think it's about the one of the Satmar Rebbe's, that he davened in a very particular notable voice. So at some point, at a wedding, I don't know, there was a Hasidic minhag to have a guy make jokes type of thing. So he, with the Rebbe's permission, he asked is it okay if I make fun of the Rebbe? The Rebbe said yeah. And the guy, so he's doing his joke, and he starts imitating the way the Rebbe davened, in this voice, whatever it was. And the Rebbe started crying. It was a big deal. He made the Rebbe cry. So one of the Rebbe was
wow, gotta appreciate how feel bad that must have been.
yeah, exactly. So he's I'm so sorry. I asked for your permission. He's no, don't worry, I'm not offended. He goes, I'm crying because if you can imitate the way I daven, what is my davening? If it's so repetitive and so the same every single time that you can literally imitate it to the T, that means I'm doing it. That means I'm just imitating myself. I think that was the line in the story.
That's a good
the way
line.
It was told. I'm just imitating myself.
Yeah.
And I think that also is a big part.
Yeah,
of
I'll give you an example of that. So this is, I gotta give credit. This is Ayala Fader. This is Rabbi Fader's daughter, who I teach in Lamda. So she was asking for tips for what to do to increase davening, increase kavanah while davening, and I had previously given the tip, my biggest tip, I guess, I don't know if I've said this yet, but my biggest tip is insert personal bakashos in all the bakashos in the Shema, not all of them, but not just in Shema Tefilah, because then you just end up waiting until Shema Tefilah, and then you it's just checking your watch until you get to Shema Tefilah. But if you insert personal bakashos in all of the brachos where they're relevant, so then you end up involving yourself. We're selfish creatures. This is very Mishlaic. You involve your own self and your own needs in all the tefillos, and that's what you're supposed to do for tefillah. So that's my go-to tip. And so Ayala asked, she said, I did that and it worked for a while, but then it stopped. It stopped I stopped doing it with Kavana. So I gave the advice of every once in a while, and this is for myself, is, I catch myself saying personal bakashos by rote. And sometimes what you have to do is you have to like reset your bakashos. This is like a level up thing. Like level 1 is you got to insert your own bakashos. Level 2 is you have to think about the bakashos and have kavana. Level 3 is you have to stop saying bakashos. And then what it does is you end up like feeling deprived. Like, and when I say stop, I don't mean just like naturally stop. I mean, don't say bakashos for a while. And you end up feeling a natural like I want to ask for the stuff that I like want, or that I need. And then but you're forcing yourself to not ask. And then what it forces you to do is to scrutinize. First of all, you're already now thinking of the bracha in a real bakasha way. Like it'd be like if you went before a human being who you had to ask something for, and it was usher for you to use certain words, the words that you're accustomed to use to ask for the thing. You would end up like trying to figure out, well, how can I ask this in a way through other words? And then you find out, hey, guess what? Anshe Knesset Agdola came up with all the right words for you. And like, probably the stuff that you're asking for is already in like the actual text of the Shemona Esrei. So like, just pay attention to what you're actually asking, And so it's that similar thing of like, it's not exactly the same, but the idea of imitating yourself, of like catching yourself, being just doing a certain rote activity and not doing it naturally. You got to break out of that when you catch yourself doing that. And in fact, this leads to another. Hold on, just a second here.
I actually have a point about that.
Yeah, sure. While you do that, you got to find another Bruce Lee quote. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the wanting to say something but not forces you to pay more attention to what you are actually doing, and like whether it's fulfilling that. Like I actually had a point like 10 minutes ago that I wanted to say, and then it never ended up being a good time, and we moved on.
Yeah, I saw you on mute, but
yeah. I was like, I feel like a few different times I was like I wanted to say it, but I like. Yeah,
go ahead. You can say it now.
Well, no, I'm just saying I was waiting, and then that forced me to like think about whether what was being said was like addressing what I was thinking.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Was that what you were gonna say? That was a good point, but I don't
the thing I was gonna say was kind of said, which is maybe like setting, like let's say like setting aside like 10 minutes more than however long it normally takes you to daven, and like making sure you're not gonna have any distractions or being interrupted, and like and saying this time is just gonna be for davening, and then and I think maybe also not doing that at like regular intervals.
Yes,
It's like, so that when you do it, it's not part of a routine of doing that type of thing.
I think that's very wise, and I that's why I think like viewing these as isolated experiments rather than, look, some experiments. Okay, I take that half back. Okay, I think the thing that I agree with is that this should not strive to be a thing you take on, that you like, a practice you take on, whether you do it in isolated instances or whether you do it for a discrete period of time, or that's not the right word, for like a delimited period of time where you say like, I'll do this for, for 2 weeks or something like that, and then I'll stop. And then you actually have to stop. Like, I think the key is that you just don't let it become a thing that becomes something your super ego is just trying to get you to try to do, or like something that you take upon yourself, because then you start to relate to it differently. But I agree with you in principle.
Yeah, and I think also the like that way, you don't start relating to it in a rote way. Also,
right? Yeah. Point here that another Bruce Lee point I want to make here, is this is in Organized Despair. He says that. So the secondhand artist is a term he uses for people who are, it's a derogatory term, okay, that you're not original. The secondhand artist, in blindly following the teacher, accepts his pattern, and as a result, his action and above all, his thinking becomes mechanical. His response is automatic according to the pattern, and thereby he ceases to expand or to grow. He's a mechanical robot, a product of thousands of years of propaganda and conditioning. The secondhand artist seldom learns to depend upon himself for expression. Instead, he faithfully follows an imposed pattern. What is nurtured is the dependent mind rather than the independent inquiry. And he actually talked earlier about how, hold on, actually, I should have read this earlier here. Yeah. So I got to read this part here. So this is him talking about his Jeet Kune Do, which is his style of martial arts that he invented. Before we look into Jeet Kune Do, let's find out what exactly a classical style of martial art is. To begin with, we must realize the absolute fact that man created style. Disregard the many colorful histories of their founders by a wise, mysterious monk, by a special messenger in a dream, in holy revelation, flooded with golden light, and so forth and so on. A style should never be the gospel truth, the laws and principles of which can never be violated. Man, the human being, is always more important than the style. Okay, now here's where he goes, how styles are started. The founder of a style may be exposed to some partial truth, but as time passes by, especially after the founder has passed away, his postulates, his inclination, his concluding formula, we constantly learn, we never conclude, become a law. Creeds are invented, reinforcing ceremonies are prescribed, separative philosophies are formulated, and finally the institutions are erected so that what might have started off as some sort of personal fluidity of its founder is now solidified, fixed knowledge, organized and classified response presented in a logical order, a preserved cure-all for mass conditioning. In so doing, the well-meaning followers have made this knowledge not only a holy shrine, but a tomb in which the founder's wisdom is buried. One more paragraph. If we honestly look at the reality of combat as it actually is and not as we would like it to be, I'm sure we cannot help but notice that a style tends to bring about adjustment, partiality, denials, condemnations, and a lot of justification. In short, the solution being offered is the very cause of the problem, placing limitations and obstacles on our natural growth and consequently obstructing the way to genuine understanding. So here's the thing, and this is the interesting clash between Bruce Lee and Torah, okay, which is one of the very interesting clashes, which is that originally Tefilah was like that. Tefilah was each person formulating their own encounter with God and their own avodah shebelev, their own shevach, bakasha, and hodah, organically and naturally in accordance with their own needs, reacting to whatever happened based on their knowledge, okay? That was great until people stopped being able to do that. So then the Anshe Knesset Agdola formulated something that contains the avos, the general categories of all of our needs and the proper praises of God and the proper shevach, and we are obligated to engage in that. The danger, though, is that because we have to do that, that becomes, like Bruce Lee is describing, like a fixed prison where it's just being done robotically and by rote. But unlike Bruce Lee, who innovated his own style, we don't have the luxury or the permission to do that in halacha. We can't just like daven however we want. Joe's case aside of like extemporaneous tefillos afterwards, but certainly in the actual Shemona Esrei, we can't do that. So the challenge is to find out how to be spontaneous and original and nuanced and personal within the confines of the set text of tefillah. And that's the skillful frustrations that I was talking about before, is like trying to figure out how this static text can trigger new growth, new meaning, new insight, and that you relate to it like, in that Rashi or the Chazal that Rashi quotes on Hayom al Levavecha, that it shouldn't be like a diotagma yeshana. It shouldn't be like an old edict that you aren't excited for. It should be like a new thing that you're looking for and applying fresh to yourself each time. And so like the trick is, how do you do that in tefillah? And like the advice I gave to Ayala, thank you, Isaac. I recommend people read that. The advice I give to Ayala of like putting in your own bakashos, which is the personal fluidity and modification, and then depriving yourself of that in order to stick to the set text and try and find meaning in that could be a very, very useful tool for like striking that balance between originality and freshness, but like within the confines of the rigid halacha. Let's not just talk about it. Let's apply one of the Atomic Habits techniques, okay, and actually make a plan for what to do as an experiment. So what should we do as an experiment for tefillah, given everything we've said now? It should be a limited experiment, and it should, we've thrown around several ideas, one being to prolong the amount of time we spend saying the actual words, one being just being kovea itim l'tefillah, like regardless of how long you actually daven during that time. So what should we do? And we should come up with something, and then come up with a time and parameters for how to do it, and then report back. So what do you want to do? This is serious. Like how can you actually make?
I know now it's legit.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, this is. I've said this before. I don't know when I said this. This is my machlokus with Rabbi Moskowitz. I mean, I said this on, I think, Friday Q&A. Rabbi Moskowitz staunchly maintains that, like, how do you change yourself? You go over the ideas clearly, and over time you change automatically, and you shouldn't try to force change. Maybe I'm just impatient, but I think that there are things that you can do. And I'm not saying that you're forcing change in the sense that we're putting super ego pressure on ourselves that we have to change. I'm proposing an experiment where we try out something in order to gain self-knowledge. And what is tefillah if not self-knowledge? That's literally, Lis Palel is literally self-judging, so, we're doing a tefillah experiment within tefillah. So what should we do?
I think first, for choosing a time, that should be like a personal thing. Like, when do you feel most relaxed? When do you?
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a uniform time.
Concerns.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I guess step one is choose a tefillah where you have that leisure Turo feeling. Not that I want to associate Turo with davening. Wow, never thought I'd say that. But yeah, the one that Ezra was describing, right? Okay, so now the question is, what do we do during that time as the experiment? What should the first experiment be?
I know for myself, from Marav, I definitely have the time to make it a set, parameterized amount of time.
Yeah, and I think that probably is most likely for people's schedule in general, because statistically people have the least to do after Mariv. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay, I'm down with that. So what's going to be the experiment then?
I think first of all, surrounded by bakashos, or surrounding bakashos. So first, like, jot down like what your bakashos would be.
So this is actually an interesting question, right? Is that, like, I'm torn between, on the one hand, you have this idea of, if you're going to go before the king, you think about what you're going to say before you say it, right? But then you also run the risk of delivering it by rote, as opposed to, what's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos of, don't make your tefillah like a masoi, but it should be like tachanunim and something lifnei hamakom. Isaac, do you know this?
No, I don't.
Yeah. But, like, so I'm always like a little torn, and I do both, about how much to preemptively formulate my bakashos. I could see both ways. I just wanted to point that out. I'm not saying which way you should do.
I think for me personally, I think what I would do is just try to like spend an extra 10 minutes on Marav. Because I think for me, I have a tendency to rush through davening, and, like, if I don't have any, like, constraints, I'll like just like go as quickly as possible. But I think for me, the best thing is to just like set myself a time of like 10 minutes longer. So
yeah. The question, I guess, is that too ambitious?
Yeah, I was gonna say 10 minutes is a pretty long time.
Yeah, it's really, it sounds short, but yeah.
10 minutes is like super long.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be 10 minutes actually davening, 10 more minutes actually davening. It would be 10 minutes davening, or doing absolutely nothing and just thinking about davening.
Yeah.
Like, so, like, if, let's say I finish with 5 minutes left, I'm just gonna sit there and like think.
Yeah. I feel like that's going to be the safest bet of the allotting yourself that time, because first of all, it lends itself to the most variety in terms of what you choose to do in the moment, like whether you choose to like go more or not. And, like, if you end up with the worst result, which is you get done early and you just sit there, it forces you to sit there after tefillah, which you're supposed to do halakhically anyway, and then you get to have this very uncomfortable, skillfully frustrating experience of watching your own thoughts, which no one likes to do, like, especially like in a forced setting, Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I guess we have to see. I have no idea, actually. I'm very good at knowing how long Shachris takes me. I really don't know how long Mariv takes me. I'm so tired by that time that I don't know what to do. I got to think that through.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest, which is almost like what you guys are describing as like the b'diavad version of your experiment. I was gonna describe as l'chachila, like after you finish Elenu of Marv, to
Yeah.
just sit in a chair for like 3 to 4 minutes.
Yeah.
You're sitting there, like no phone, no book, like
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. That's not a bad
Just
idea.
silent reflection either about what you davened about, what you
Yeah.
didn't daven about, or whatever you end up, reflecting on. Just
Yeah. I think
putting, taking like just putting yourself into a routine of reflection and thoughtfulness thought, which like should be an ironic statement, but ironically it isn't. Um,
Before or after
I
davening?
think afterwards, just 3 to 4 minutes afterwards, to just sit there, not rush out, whatever. If you end up davening in, a 4-minute marv, okay, so it is what it is. But you sit there for whatever the amount of time is silently and just, reflect.
Yeah,
And then
I
I
personally
think
like
it'll
that
help.
better. For me, I think that puts less pressure on actually changing my tefillah. And I feel like once I'm putting pressure on myself for like changing how I say the tefillah, and that's like already like, but afterwards, I think for me, that's gonna be the better alternative. Is also for me, it's easier instead of allotting 10 minutes for everything and then like using leftover times and like subtracting and stuff. Just having like the 5 minutes afterwards, I think is easier to manage.
Yeah, I think it's different for different people. Yeah, for me, definitely, allotting myself like a very generous amount of like a too generous amount of time for davening itself will be good for me.
Yeah, I hear that.
To help,
yeah, I did.
oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're I'd say we're probably at very different stages of tefillah development, based on my knowledge of myself. So,
and I definitely agree that it differs based on for different people, and you should do what you think is going to be best for you. I do want to say that I did Headspace for a year and a half, not consecutively. I did it for a full year, and then I did it for half a year, or
You
I guess
bought
during
the
the
whole
first.
library?
What was that?
You bought the whole library, or?
I subscribed. I don't know what the system was exactly.
What's that? What are you talking about?
It's a mindfulness or meditation app. Basically, like I'm sure you can find equal stuff online for free. I just paid the money because I knew that if I didn't pay the money, then I wouldn't do it. But if I was paying money for it, then that would be an incentive to do it. And like it's and so I scheduled my mindfulness time for 10 minutes before Mariv every night, and that was good, but I didn't try it afterwards. And I want to see if that has a different feeling, because the feeling of rushing off afterwards is a big deal. I feel like that's a big temptation, and I just want to see what happens after that. Okay, so we've come up with general parameters for the experiment, which is giving ourselves extra time. I mean, as I said, the bakashos thing, which I think is totally good. Again, that's my first recommendation is bakashos. But sounds like the extra time and see what happens general plan is a good one. I think I'm going to go for the 5 minutes after Mariv, and I already davened Mariv tonight, so I guess I'll have to start tomorrow. So I guess I'll try it tomorrow. We have tomorrow's Tuesday, right? So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'll try to remember to report back on Friday or on Thursday night just to see what happened. And it would be good if we could compare notes. Let's try for 3 days. 3 days is a realistic, expectation. I don't know what your schedules are for the next 3 days, Mariv, but if you can do it, see what happens.
Yeah, and I think just as a tip, whatever amount of time you give yourself, you should put a timer on your phone for like 3.5, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And then put your phone a few.
Yeah, and then just forget about it.
Feet away, and put it on do not disturb or airplane mode or whatever mode, and then just sit there and solitary.
Because otherwise
silence.
you're just gonna be checking it. Yeah.
Right. But you should have the timer so okay, 4 minutes, whatever it is.
Timer.
And when it beeps, it beeps.
All right, good. I hope this was. I know we didn't get to start our shiur yatzer. I hope this was a productive discussion.
Yeah, very much so. Really good.
All right, good. Very good. All right, so we'll compare notes afterwards, and then let's plan to start our shiur yatzer on Monday. And those of you who I'm going to see in Mishlei Shir, see you in a few minutes. Different Zoom link.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.